Hello, welcome to Sunday Club. We are starting a little later than usual this week because I started another stream and there were issues with the sound. So on that note, I'm going to check that people can hear me right now before we get started. Before I do another one with no sound and have to do the whole thing again, because you could spend the whole of my Sunday just doing the intro about 57 times. So if you can hear my voice in the background, that will be what it is. Let me just check. Come on, YouTube. Oh, that's me. Great. Okay, so we got sound this time. Okay, cool. Welcome to Sunday Club. This is live streaming for Ruby on Rails, and we are going to be building a Ruby on Rails app together and taking a look at some of the aspects of it from a learner's point of view. That's basically anyone who's been part of a boot camp or is kind of teaching themselves to code online and is interested in Rails, or maybe someone who's coming out of the end of that journey, looking to build their own apps or apps they're working on for clients or employers or anything like that, and wants to look at how they can apply certain things they've seen in tutorials or on other learning resources. And so that's what we want to do here in Sunday Club. And what we can, so I can just close this down real quick. Sorry, I've got a bunch of stuff going for the stream. Cool, so what we covered last week is kind of running Rails new and building a new Rails app from scratch. And we talked about what that app is going to be, more on that in a second. And we also took a look at some of the models that we might want to add to it. And what we're going to do this week is actually build those models out. We are going to hopefully put a front end on the app, a user interface that we can take a look at, and kind of more importantly, go back to that idea of what we spoke about from the learner's point of view, which is how can a framework like Rails provide you with kind of some stuff for free. So you might have been learning about SQL and databases. You might have been learning some JavaScript-y things. You might have been learning some Ruby or Python or C# or whatever it might be. And you might have kind of viewed them in isolation. Whereas what we get from something like Rails, a framework like Rails, is it ties a bunch of those things together, and we get a lot of value from that in terms of productivity and learning, and getting a lot of stuff that you don't need to learn up front. And that might not make a lot of sense if you're early on in your journey, but later on you'll kind of know what that means. So we're going to take a look at that actually in the app itself. So let's talk about what we're building. We are going to build a website for these streams. So you will be able to kind of go, and each stream will have its own page. And what we want to do is make that multi-user so that multiple people can create channels, and then they can have multiple streams, and then we want to have multiple people being able to kind of manage those. So that gives us a nice set of models that we can then manipulate and play with it, and gives us a kind of real world app that we can work on. So if let's go and take a look at some code. I am going to check that you guys can still hear me actually, because I am still slightly paranoid about that not being the case. So bear with me if I take 10 seconds here. It's really worth it, because I don't want to have to do this whole thing again. So let me just check. I can actually open that in that app, which will be easier on my iPad. Yep, cool. So I can still hear things. So if I pause that, that's good. Cool. Okay, so let's jump over to our coding view and take a look at some of code. Easier. So we had some notes previously, which I think we can kind of recreate here. So we had the idea where we want to have users in our system, and we spoke about maybe not doing what I would normally do, which is build the simplest version of the thing that we need first, and then build on it from there. What I think we might do is just go for a slightly more complex set of models to begin with, just so that we can get to applying some things that learners might bump into in that kind of post-bootcamp or during bootcamp process, kind of about the associations of different things, and kind of going through other associations and make it a little bit more complex. So what we spoke about was maybe having organizations So that would presumably represent something like a group of users, and maybe the people who owned it. Each one of those would have a channel, just like this Sundae Club has a YouTube channel, and then we actually spoke about, rather than having initially, if I was just building this out, perhaps it would just be I would just start with the channel, multiple channels, and then have multiple streams, and then put organizations above them. But like I said, we're going to go a little bit more complex, a little bit more quickly, and rather than having streams, what I think we might be more interested in doing to make this more useful to learn is actually having something more like a channel event. Oh, I've pluralized some and singularized others. So, and that could be a stream, but it might also be a post or something like that. I'm not really sure what that looks like yet, but I just want to make that a little bit more complex than I probably would normally if I was building this for production or something like that. So let's just close these other windows down. Sorry, I'm just checking that the stream is still running. Super paranoid today, wasted a bunch of time talking to no one for a little while this morning. Not that we get a huge number of viewers for the stream, but you know, you want to at least be able to have my boring voice rattling on. Okay, cool. We then spoke about some other things that we might want to add, like chat and comments. We talked about having YouTube or something like Twitch API integrations, and those would be other things that you could maybe say, okay, well, when there's a new YouTube stream, automatically create a channel event, or there was a stream or something like that. So this is a really rough, simple example of creating a very rough map of models. If you are a learner, this is something you would spend potentially more time on in terms of like designing out your system in advance and thinking further through. One of the things that I think is really useful about having more development experience is that I think you get a little bit more confident in saying, okay, well, I know that I can mock this up in code quite quickly and maybe build a prototype or something like that, and don't quite need to do as much planning on paper. Although, again, sometimes I totally do way more of that and draw everything out before writing loads of code. But I think with experience, what you get is the flexibility to kind of know how far you want to go in prototyping, designing, and things like that. When, as a learner, that is a little bit more fuzzy in terms of like, how much should I know about these things before I start trying to build them, because you're still dealing with the idea of like how to do it as well as what the final result looks like. And with experience comes, you can kind of say, okay, well, I know how to do those things, so I only really care more about the implementation than worrying about getting stuck along the way if it's something I already know. So let's start by building some of these models in Rails, and that will also help us touch on what Rails gives us for free from a learner's point of view, which I think is really useful. Rather than starting with users, we don't really care about them right now. Let's start about associations. So let's build out organizations to begin with, and channels and channel events to begin with. Let's start there, which I think is potentially counterintuitive, because I think if I were a learner now, I think I would start with users, because I think I would view the system as like that login page first, and like a user, a visitor turning up and having the experience of the app. Whereas that's something that I don't think we really care about at this point in the nicest possible way. So let's not worry about that for now. Let's go and build some organizations. So what we're going to do is we're going to this is just the terminal over on the right. It just happens to be in VS Code. So we're going to run this is I was going to run binrails g. That's just a shortcut for binrails generate. And we'll run it to we'll do the generate model, and I'll show you what actually happens when we do this. So we want an organization, and let's run that now. So that's going to build a bunch of files for us. You remember last week we touched on we'd already built our databases and stuff. We wired up Postgres as our database when we ran Rails new. So we now have a migration. We have our model file in app models. We can click on these. That's empty. It's just an empty class. We have a migration, which is the thing that manipulates the database. We've been given all that for free. And we also have some tests, files created for us. Now, I actually mentioned last week, I'm not going to use test unit because it's not my, it's just not my, I don't know it very well. So I would have to slow down and kind of delve into that a bit deeper. So I'm going to swap that out for RSpec, but I'm not going to do that right now. But running the Rails generate model has built that for us. I actually tend to not use that a lot day to day. I know that you can manipulate these, or not manipulate, but like you can have these scaffold files. You can customize them so that when you run your generators, it will do a bunch of stuff for you. That makes total sense to me. I've never been diligent enough to actually go and do that. So I just don't. So I would normally run bin Rails generate migration and then just build up from there. Simply because the scaffolding very rarely tends to meet exactly what I need. I know I could make it do that, probably should, but I don't. So we don't need these test files, so we can remove those in a second. But let's take a look at our migration, which we really care about here. So we're creating a table in the database for our model to interact with, and so we are going to give it a name, and we are we're using t.text. You'll also see t.string a lot in. We're using Postgres as a database, so we don't have to worry about having like that. As I understand it, we don't have to worry about having that kind of 255 character version versus like the 30,000 long field. My understanding is that Postgres handles that for us sensibly. So on other databases, you're actually asked to decide, do you want this to be a short string, a short piece of text, or do you want it to be a long one? And there you lose performance aspect on don't store very small amounts of text in a large text field because there are performance costs. My understanding is that Postgres abstracts that away from us, so I just tend to use t.text all the time in Postgres. If anyone knows if that's wildly wrong, then please let me know, because that'd be annoying. And what we're also going to store is a slug, which is the part of the URL. So it would be like nameofapp.com or whatever / this name of this organization. So ours might be like Sundae-club, and that's how we know to reference this this organization. Do we want anything else in here? Let's have some stuff to look at on the view when we get it. So let's have no, let's add that to the channel itself. So let's not add that. Let's not add that here. This will do for now. And then t.timestamps is Rails that will give us updated at and created at and updated at timestamps. This is just a shorthand. You'll see it. So if we run that migration. Cool, that's run. So we should now you'll see that we've updated our schema file. So we've now got a schema there, and that table has actually been, the migration has actually created that in our database. So let's get rid of these test files that I don't need. It's up a second. This is just using Git. It just happens to be in VS Code. We could do this all via the terminal as well. So if you are a learner learning Git alongside this, don't panic about this or anything. There are many ways to use Git. I also use like SourceTree. GitHub has an app. VS Code has stuff built in, and also you might use the terminal. It's all fine. That they're all basically doing the same thing, which is what are the changes that have been made to your files. Store them in commits. So we've got a schema change, a model file, and a migration, which caused the schema change. Let's make a new branch. Initial models. I'm going to create that new branch from here, and we're just going to make this like a work in progress, a whip branch. So we're just going to save these. So I'm going to say whip add organization model. Let's commit that. That's the same as running git commit with the little message. And the reason I've put it in a branch with WIP, work in progress whip, is that we can then basically go and do some work if we're not sure what we're going to do, and then we don't have to commit that to master until we're done, and we can come and kind of change the order of those commits and write up messages for them later. So that's normally how I would work. I'd be working on a branch, kind of work just so I'm committing as I go, and then at the end be like, oh, okay, let's go take a look back at what we've done, let's kind of make some sense of it, delete what we don't need, make any edits, and then change the order of the commits or squash them down, and then pop them back onto master so that we know they're nice for people to read later. Okay, now I think at this point, now that we've run a very little amount of code but have a model, I think it's probably worth taking a look at console. So let's bump the font size right up on this to make it nice and viewable. So this is just the terminal app, and what we're going to do, I'm just that's literally the same as what's here on the right hand side. I'm just going to use the app specifically so I have a bit more room on the screen. There's no practical difference really when you're doing them. Bump that up again. So we are in. Let's go to our app. Cool. And let's start a console. So this is I want to talk about what Rails gives us. That's really what I want to touch on here. And what I mean by that is what I said at the start, which is that if you're a learner and you've gone to learn a little bit of SQL, some JavaScript, React, Node-y stuff over there, Python, Ruby, different languages, you kind of have different skills being recommended to you in different places. What a framework like Rails can give you is tying all of that together with very little code so that you don't have to worry about it all straight away. So this came from a learner I was speaking to, I think a couple of weeks ago now, and it was disconcerting for them. They were basically like, okay, where do I go next? And hadn't really come across, I think they had been, they were kind of aware of Rails and Django and Laravel and all these other different types of things, but no one had kind of recommended the reason why they might be useful from a learner's point of view. And I want to take a look at that now. So all we've done is last week we ran Rails new and got that up and running, and then now we've created one model. So we have very little code in the actual code base itself. But let's take a look at what that actually allows us to do. So we've told our app whether we have this thing called an organization, and we've given it 2 properties. We've now gone into the console, which is basically our app running without any front end on it. So we just, it might be a view, like a web page that we would view our app through, to do different things with. But a console is just like without that, I just want to speak to the server directly, and we can type in commands and have them come back. So they're the same commands that would be run in order to make a view appear, but we just don't have to worry about that. So that's what a console is for Rails. So we can actually say, okay, well, do you know about this thing called an organization? And you can see that it already knows about its name and its slug, and it knows about when it was created and when it was updated. So we can create an instance of a new organization immediately, and we've been given that functionality and all of these additional fields just by Rails, which is super helpful. Like, there's a lot of things as a learner you would need to have and get context for elsewhere. You would need to do that yourself, and that's abstracted away. So it's useful to know what those things are useful for, but we don't need to worry about it. So we can then, let's say that we have something like Max's organization, and that's going to be a variable, and we're going to make that a new organization. So I've got an empty organization assigned to this. So again, if you're really early in that learner journey, learning about variables and things like this is a fairly simple example. So you can see I can just type in Max's org and I get my organization back. But what I can also do is then start to set the properties on it. So I can say, I want this organization to be called, actually let's call it Sundae Club. That makes more sense. So let's call it Sundae Club so it knows its name. And let's set its slug. And we're gonna remember the slug is that part of the URL, so we're gonna say Sundae-club. Cool, so that's been set to. It just gives you the value back. So let's then take a look at Max's org, and you'll see that we get this back, but we've had those properties set for us. So that getting and setting is all handled by Rails just because we told it we wanted this model. Great. Now here's where it gets really cool. If we call Max's org.save, let's take a look at what happens here. We get this, and this is SQL. So this is one of those things I mentioned that the learner previously had been recommended to learn. And this has all been generated by Rails. If you remember, all we basically told it was, hey, I want to interact with this, I want to have this model, here's what the two things I want to know. It's like, Rails was like, great, you've got this thing called a migration that will migrate the database for you, but like it will migrate it will run these commands and create that for you. And then Rails is then available to save, so it's running an insert query, an insert command in SQL, and it's taking the properties that you've put in to that organization and putting them in the right fields. And it's also handling things like telling it when it was created, that's the timestamp, and when it was last updated. Really helpful, and that's all for free. So then we can say things like, okay, well let's say we want to ask our app how many organizations it has. So we can call this .count. And it knows that it has one organization, and that's for free. We haven't had to go and tell, we haven't had to go and write that SQL. We haven't had to go and do any work to make that happen. That's provided by the framework. And this is not Rails specific. I mean, this is the Rails implementation of that. But most frameworks will give you a huge amount of functionality for free. They might look and behave slightly differently, but that's really a big part of the value as a learner that you get from working with a framework, is you don't have to worry about, okay, how am I going to run this SQL command and then get that data back, format the data, deal with that some of them are dates, some of them are times, some of them are strings, and know which is which and process them. If you're using a framework, that all gets abstracted away for you. So if we say something like Max's org and we say .created at, we get that back automatically. And if we say what class is that, it knows that that's a time. So we haven't had to go and do loads of complex work around like, I've saved this as a string, but I need it to come back as a time so that I can do some time zone calculations or something. Huge amount of value for free. So that's really what I wanted to touch on this morning, is that value for learners of using a framework. And I think that's kind of, hopefully, I'm going to send this stream to the learner I was talking to, and hopefully that gets across some of that. So let's leave our console for now because we've done that and played around with it. And let's go and build, another model. So this time we're going to run the generator just for the migration. We're not going to generate the model as well because we don't need those test helpers. And we are going to create, what was the other migration called? It was called create organization. So we'll call this create channels. Sorry about these messages from Rubocop popping up down here. Bin Raspberry create channels, and you'll notice this time we've run the same generator. So again, this is provided by the framework, but we just run generate a migration rather than generate a model, and so we've just got fewer files this time. So let's you'll notice actually when we run this, we don't get the t.dot timestamps that we got generated for us last time, which is Quirk. I'm not 100% sure why you get it sometime, not another. I actually think we want our channel to have the same, two of the same attributes. That's not a problem. So you hit in the organization, we want the organization to have a name and a slug. It's fine that we want the channel to have the same thing. Two pretty common fields that you would have on something that was going to be user facing. And this will be channel.name and the other one would be organization.name. And a slug, if you remember, is just that part of the URL. So it would be, example website.com /organization slug /channel slug. That'll make some sense when we come to see it later on. So let's save that as well. Well, actually, let's add in the one we were going to add earlier, which is let's add a description to the channel as well, just so this time we have. Oh, it's when I hit save that these pop up. Okay, that's fine. Let's run this one as well. Cool, so that's migrated and that migration has been run. You see we now have the schema change to add in another table. So the schema is just a snapshot of our database, and then we have our change here. Cool. Oh, we haven't got a model file, which we want, so let's go and generate that. So in models we have organization, and now we want one called channel. I think we might get stung here because I think channel might be a keyword in active action cable or something like that. So we might come to regret this, but we'll worry about that later. So we've now got that model as well. And we'll come back to adding stuff for tests shortly. Normally we would add a test in with this, but I'm just going to back to that separately. Let's commit these as well real quick. And I'm just going to do, these are still work in progress, so we're going to do add channel model. Commit that as well. There's no pre-commit hooks or anything like that, so just a simple commit. Close everything down so far. So what we can do is just pop back. So a quick example, pop back to our console, restart it, and now we should be able to do the same thing. We now have a channel and an organization. Amazing. So what we, oh, that's quite this, you didn't know if it would run. Cool. So you can see this one, the difference being that channel has this description, so we can do that. Now, one of the things we talked about was having the, let's set a good example and install RSpec before we go too far. So over here, sorry, I've just got some stuff on the other screen because I was looking earlier at the version of I use, so we want RSpec Rails, I think, for this. So this is going to give us a test. Okay, I really want to just turn that off, or can I remake copies? Also, can I add in? I add the Rubocop in Germany as well, so let's run bundle install to get the RSpec Rails installed. Yep, that's all RSpec stuff, cool. Just a whip commit here for that. Install RSpec Rails gem. Remember, we're going to come back and tidy up all our commit messages before they go into master. This is all open source, so you can take a look at it on GitHub if you want to play around with any of these in your spare time. Just a good way to learn. Okay, so we've got that there. I actually don't know what RSpec needs, what else it needs to run. So is there like an install command for that? RSpec Rails gem. Installation. Add that to both the development and test groups. Okay, I'm pretty sure I just failed at the first hurdle because I only added it to one. It's to be in this group here. I don't think that matters actually. Oh god, that's going to get really annoying popping up every time. No, I don't think that really matters too much, so we're just going to move RSpec Rails into dev and test groups. Okay, all run against the main branch. No, don't want to do that. I think it's not strictly. Oh, okay, not strictly necessary, but that generates and make task must be created by Rails in test. Okay, I don't really know. So we can just do this, I think. So we want to write test for our code. I'm not going to go into testing at this point. I'm guessing if you're watching Ruby on Rails live stream, you've probably seen or heard about testing in some form. So that gives us a bunch of stuff that we can then as well add code generated by RSpec install that. And will that work out of the box, do we think? Boilerplate specs. So this again goes back to our generate that we were looking at earlier. Bump this font size up a bit so we can see it. Will this work, or can I just run this at this point? Oh, cool. Okay, so do we have a spec? Okay, cool. So in here, I'm just going to look at the format for these. It's pluralized, so in here we can have a new folder. Models. And then we want to add in spec RB. Oh, is there a new syntax? Should I have generated that from a? Oh, hang on, I could have done this. What an idiot I am. Okay. So if I just delete that real quick. Gosh, can I do that and then type in organization, get organization spec. Okay, and then I can do the same thing and I can do channel. Yeah, I'm sure that channel is not going to be a good name for that, but either way. Cool, okay, so now when we run bundle exec, oh my god, these are incredibly annoying. Can I just turn that off? Can I just disable that temporarily in this workspace? Please reload to disable. Oh god. Screw it. Let's just see if we can keep going. Okay, so let's just keep checking on this stream whether it's working. Just checking there's still sound here because I am super paranoid about this morning. That's me, that's my voice you can hear in the background. And let's just check whether I am still talking. Yes, excellent, great. Okay, so now if we run the bundle exec RSpec command, do we get 2 pendings? Is it reading those straight out of the box? Ah, amazing. Look at the sheer amount of deprecation we get simply from running something out of the box. That is wild. Source annotation, let's not worry about that right now. Okay, let's come back to that so we don't really need to worry about that. Because the reason that I wanted to install the test is so that we can take a look at the associations. So that's what we're more interested in here, and we expect an organization. Which way around? Does have many come with RSpec? Rails RSpec association matches. Oh no, it comes with this. I think I'm just used to having it. Okay. I'm going to install this gem as well, simply because I'm used to having it, and it's basically one line test to check that associations exist. So that's just for test. No, I'm not going to constrain the version of the test. We want the test to break. if they don't run. So let's install this first. It only needs inside test. Cool, and then we can close these and run bundle install. That's installed, so we can then commit those changes. And what we'll do is group all of these commits later on, just so that before they go into master, we can install everything at the start and then do our code afterwards. Because when you're working on a branch, you can reorder the commits before they get merged into master. So we want to install the choose gem. Cool. And that should then allow us to jump over to here. Cool, I think that should then allow us to have cool. Do we actually have to, can I just do subject? Yeah, I think. I do these all the time, I can never remember the syntax for them. I look at them every day. So we would expect an organization do you have to wrap these in an it block? I don't think you do you? Sorry, it's just one of those things that you see every day and don't pay any attention to whatsoever. No, okay, so we can do one of these one-liner ones, right? Okay, cool. Is expected.to have many, and what's it expected to have? It's expected to have many channels. Cool, so now these things are incredibly annoying. This should fail because we haven't added our associations yet. Great. So we know we've got a one failure here. This is all nice and basic stuff that you should be covering or have covered in tutorials if you're a learner. And then we can just add it. Many channels. And really want to expected organization. Okay, well, that's good because it doesn't work. Okay, I'm obviously never great at remembering the syntax. Just looking on the other screen at the moment to check. The organization has many channels. Does it actually check the field on the channels? I didn't think it did. Check organization to. Oh, is it because that syntax? Is it because I haven't created Oh my god, these must be so frustrating to watch when it's like a really obvious mistake. I tend not to mind too much when I'm watching them because I then go and oh, is it? Oh no, any organization to respond to have. Oh, do we have to tell RSpec to handle that shoulda matches thingy? Didn't actually read the docs on this as usual. Then bundle install. Now you need to configure the jet by telling it which matches you want. Okay. If you work on a Rails app, simply place this at the bottom of Rails helper. Right, I should really have done that. So you should. Kind of like really good to go back and do this more regularly. Actually, you just take this for granted on because you're working on existing projects so much. So in Rails helper, go and just library RSpec with library Rails. Is that it? And that's it. So now if we pop the terminal back open, run it again. Great, it does check the foreign key. Okay, cool. So that's a better error message. So that's kind of a good signal that you're getting closer to the thing you're trying to accomplish. If your error messages are just straight up confusing, you might be more steps away than we thought. Cool, so this is kind of stuff you cover in these early tutorials in terms of adding associations. We are just cool, so let's go and do that. Let's go and add our migration. I'm just going to close my window because it's making that weird noise. Cool. Migration, add. What you can do at this point is, because we're still working on this, we could drop the migrations we already had and kind of refactor them down, but I'm just going to add a new one here. So we want to change database. We're going to add a column, and that's going to be to our channels table, and we want to add the new column called organization ID. And I think they're all big int by default these days, I think. And do we want channels to allow a null value here? bin Rails db migrate, which I'm guessing is doing the test one as well. I can't remember. We have to run. Oh, that's incredibly annoying. Okay, cool. So I'm going to go and check that it should be big int. I think my brain thinks that's Rails' new default for the foreign key ones. Oh, also I've added the ID manually, but I think we could do references and it would do the foreign key on the other side for us. Might get read some of the docs about that during the week. Okay, so let's just see if our test passes now. Great. So we've added an association, and what we can do is go back to our console. We can just exit and then go back in, so we've got a new version of our app. And now what we can do is when we've got our organization, remember we can ask our app different things now. So we could ask it how many organizations it had. We can then go and get the first one. So .first is another example of something that's being provided by the framework. And we can assign that, let's say that is SC, Sundae Club. We're just going to assign that there. And then we can say, right, because we've added that association, now we can ask Sundae Club about its channel. So let me just change the name of that variable. Yep, and then we can say to it, oops, can you tell me about, as an organization, what channels you have? And if you look at how much SQL we're getting for free here from the framework. So select channels, from channels where channels organization ID equals blah, 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 and then it's got the ID that we want to pass in. And we could also create a new channel and associate it. So we could say, okay, well, our organization is Sundae Club, and we are going to create a new channel, and we'll call that C for channel. And then we're going to say that's going to be, we're going to call that, we're just going to call that, I don't know, every Sunday, just to give it a random name. And we can then save that. Remember, this is all stuff we're getting for free, so we now have a new channel. But what we can do for that channel is we can say, what organization does that belong to? Actually, we can just say the organization, and then we can give it Sundae Club, because we know that that's an organization. And all we're getting here is we're getting a huge amount from our framework, so it knows, our channel knows. Oh no, actually it doesn't. I haven't told the channel that it has. Okay, that's not going to work. We can do it this way around though. We can say Sundae Club dot channels, and we can into that put our channel, and so it will know to will that then save it through there? So if I then do dot save, oh, I don't think it'll actually save the association. So what we want to do is just pop into channel and add in the other half of that association, which is the belongs to. So wait, where has my test gone for? Wait, where has my test gone? Okay, that's weird. So let's take that. It is expected to belong to. Just run that. Sorry, this thing. Oh, I'm just aware that my video will be down in the bottom right as well. So let's move this over to here. Sorry if that's been covering that a little bit. So let's move that to there. We can actually move that. Well, actually, we can use the terminal instead. Let's do that. That'll be safer. I should have done that from the start. Sorry. So we can actually get rid of this one, not use that because it's an annoying place. We can just use the terminal. Maybe change the color of this for next time. And we can then say, let's get out of the console. Oh, we can have two tabs open, can't we, in here? Well, let's make a tab with a color so that we can kind of see what's going on. What does these are all hideous from my memory. One of these is white, isn't it? Nope. Ugh, okay. Is basic white? No. Wait, they're all the same. This one's like a weird yellowy color, isn't it? Yeah, okay, cool. Cool, okay, so in here we can then do bundle, exec, RSpec, and then we can run channel, so we expect this to fail. Cool, because we haven't added the belongs to association, and then we go into here, and we can say that channel belongs to organization. Okay, if I can type, okay, cool. And then we rerun our test. And this exists, cool. And now if we go back into here, let's let's reload this. We should now be able to recreate some of what we just had. So we can have new channel C, and Sundae Club can be that organization. And what did we give? We named our channel every Sunday. We which is cool. So let's. Oh, I think we actually saved that, didn't we? So how many channels have we got? Got one. Oh, okay. So we can say we can name our channel every Sunday as a variable and say, let's go and get that one from the database. We know it's dot first because it's the only one in there. That's just a shorthand for grabbing that one. We could have got it by the ID or something like that. And let's say that every Sunday, which is a channel, dot organization, and we want that to be Sunday Club. And then we can save it. So then we can say every Sunday dot save. Has it already done that for us then? So if we all dot reload on that. Have we already done it previously? Cool. Okay, so they knew that. So we now have our organization there. So that's our associations done for those two. And we've got a bunch of stuff to commit. Let's see what we've got in here. These are initial. So we want to commit this because that can then go with our add RSpec helpers for shooter matches. Yep. And this is our migration and our schema change for adding an organization ID to channels. Yeah, and then we want to add the associations and the tests. Associations and tests for channel organization. The test parts. Okay, cool. So we've committed everything, which we can go back and tidy up later before merging it into master. What we're looking at for time. How long have we been running? So I don't want to go too long. Might be able to come back after lunch or something like that and carry on with these. So how do we know how long this has been running? Not 100% sure how to find that out. I refresh this. Sorry, bear with me a second. I just am not 100% sure on what view I get from the stream thingy. Okay, so it's either an hour and 54 or 54. No, I started at 11:30, so we're up to 54 minutes. Okay, so that gives us our associations. And then we want to pop a UI. Okay, so let's carry on for now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a short break for a couple minutes and then come back and put a front end on this. So let's do that. Okay, welcome back. Let's put some front end on this app. So we did look last week at running the server and kind of looking at things. We don't need to delve back into that. We've got our models and they've got a couple of associations on. Let's take a look at how we can view them. What we want to do is we want to view. Let's just view a channel, because that's actually more interesting than viewing an organization. So let's build that out to start with. So let's say doing anything in this and without the controller to start with. So let's add in channels controller. Again, you can do this with, oh, actually, yeah. You can do this with scaffolding. And if you're a learner, maybe that's easier. Because I usually end up putting a typo or something in there, but you don't need to use the generator if you don't want to. So you can see we've now got a channels controller within a controller. So I'm not going to go into MVC. If you've come this far and you're interested in Rails, that would have been one of the first that got mentioned: the model, the view, and the controller. I don't know why we say it in that order, but actually the controller actually sits between the model and the view, so it's a weird way of describing it. And then each controller, for something like a website, would have a series of actions, and the action that we care about here is the show action. So we are going to show our channel and take a look at it. And so we're also going to add is a route for that as well. So we are going to. Oh, we didn't keep our stuff from last week about our home pages and stuff. Yeah, that's annoying. Because do we have to assign a route? I don't know if we do. Do we have to have a route in? Sorry, I'm just gonna look over at my other app, my other screen, just to look for what I'm doing there. I do have one, even though I don't use them there. Okay, let's not worry too much with that. So let's add in and we just only really want show view. We touched on routes last episode, so or last week. We can just kind of skip delving into those in any detail. Although we should be able to get a. Well, let's just open it here. We can run a server, and yeah, let's. Great. Okay. So Rails info routes channels /id. Okay, cool. So we don't have a view, so we should get an error. But what we should be able to do then is great. So basically, what this error tells us is like, hey, hey, I'm Rails, and I know that you have a controller here, the channels controller, and I know that you've told me that it should have a show view, but I don't know what to show in a browser here. So if this was, you can actually see in the error message, which is really useful, if it's an API, you might not need to view this in a browser, but you haven't told me what to do. So what we're going to do is add an HTML file for it, or an ERB file. And that's another example of what Rails will give you by default. It's basically saying, If you tell me that you have a show action and you create a corresponding show view, I will wire everything up so that you don't have to deal with how all that stuff works. So we can add a folder called channels, and then we can add in show.html.erb, and we can say the channel view. And then when we refresh this, great, we know that we've got that working. So that's going through our controller to our view. So we're going through the channels controller into the show action. And the show action by default in here, you can see it actually expects an ID, and that's our ID of 1. So I'm brushing over all this stuff. If you're doing tutorials and things, I'm assuming you're covering all that stuff elsewhere. So there's just an assumption here that you're covering that stuff. So let's close these ones down because we now only need this. And so what we want to do is get the model involved. So we actually want to, I've just hard coded that. And so we have our action, but we want to go and retrieve our model. So what we're going to do is add a method that does that. And we're going to have, again, this is stuff that you will have seen. Yeah, I think that's fine. It's read only, so yeah, I think don't need any sanitization stuff on that. We haven't renamed it a slug. Let's not worry too much about that. So we can just use the ID for now. We'll come back to slugs another time. Before action, set channel. So before I run any of these actions, what do you want me to do? And you can give it a list of things you want it to do before it runs the actions. We say, oh, can you just set the channel? And that will set the channel to this instance variable, you know that because it's got an at in front of it. And then anything that's an instance variable in the controller, the set in the controller before the action runs, will then be available in the view. And so what we can then do here is say, great, well, I now know that you have a channel and I can show its name. Again, stuff you probably covered in tutorials. So this is called Every Sunday, which is an awful name for a channel, but you get the idea. However, what we could do is use those associations we created earlier. So in our show view, we could say, right, that's the name of the channel. But what we can also do is say, organization channel dot organization dot name, and that will also appear because the channel knows about its organization, and then we can run through that through the channel to get to organization and show its name. So that's kind of a simple example of putting a front end on the app, which is super cool. That's how little code you really need to get this up and running. Because I mean, beyond that basic code and that once that association is assigned, viewing a channel on this is just going to be like more of the same, basically. That's just how much Rails gives you for free. There's a load of stuff that we can now do, like make a nice layout and start to present things really nicely. But essentially, once that association is formed, that's the basis of all we really care about. So now that we have, I don't really want to sit for ages and write controller tests right now. So let's defer that for another time. Let's commit these. Add channels, controller, and show view. I'm gonna come back to the test because I don't really want to do those on the stream right now. Because I want to. Do I want to add channel items or do I want to take a look at the UI? I think I want to take a look at the UI. let's say we're over an hour into this, so I don't want this to run really longer than 90 minutes particularly. Take us up to 1. Okay, let's take a look at this UI. So we've now got views that are working for our app, and so what I was wondering is if we could make them look a bit nicer. And we know we can get our data from our models and data from our controllers. And what I've done in the past is use different UI frameworks like Bootstrap and things like that. And I've been interested in running Tailwind on this because I've used a mixture of utility classes and BEM syntax for CSS before. Is that what we want to do right now? I think because this isn't a tutorial, I'm not too interested in kind of just going through more of the same of this. I'm interested in like, okay, well, that's how to do those things, and the tutorials and stuff you can cover elsewhere into getting into more details into those associations. I'm immediately more interested in how we're going to lay these things out. So that's what's drawing me towards doing the UI next. In reality, if I were not streaming this, I would do the kind of due diligence of going back and tidying up that commit and squash everything down, put it in the right order. But I'm going to do that either in a homework edition or in my spare time before next week. Yeah, let's just start poking around in that and see what it takes to get this set up, because I don't think it's going to be a huge amount. And what I actually started looking at during the week, so I had done some research into this, was the Rails byte stuff we had looked at last week in terms of these scripts that people are providing to get these things added into Rails code bases for other people, just to save you the time of having to do that yourself. So we've got a script here that should maybe get Tailwind up and running. So it will add it to Yarn. It will then add the files we need. So application.css. Have we got? By default, is this running app JavaScript CSS application JavaScript? Okay, so where is CSS running by default in here? It's still running through sprockets, I guess. So that's going to add that. It's going to add that as a require. Oh, okay, so you get both. You can still presumably have the sprockets one, you just get a different start sheet. Okay, so let's see if we can run this. This is now, so once we've got our associations, that's done. This is now separate. We're all committed up to date. We're just going to keep going. So totally in reality, we would not run a branch this long. We would have tidied up our work and gone and done that. But just to keep today kind of moving forward, we're going to go and experiment with UI as well. So just want to see if we can get this looking nice, because I've seen some kind of streams of people getting out of the box that pretty quickly. So let's see what happens to us. What I should do while doing this is like keep a list of tidy up tasks or something like that. Okay, that's done a bunch of stuff. God, if the server just runs, that then... Okay, so we're going to look at some of our new files. That's the downside of not running this in VS Code. You can't just click on them. Presumably there's a ZSH thing to make that possible. I just don't have one. Okay, so that's grabbing those and they are invisible to us. Are they invisible to us? Importing base, importing components, and importing utilities. So let's go and take a look. I'm providing no huge context for this. If you're interested, this is something you'd need to look up in their own time. I'm just kind of keen to say components. So with this now, so we get a bunch of stuff out the box, and I'm assuming this is running here. Let's see if this throws us any errors or if that just worked like magic. In which case, that Rails bytes thing is pretty cool, because that would have saved me a bunch of time of having to go and read. I used to have to assume that whoever wrote this read the docs more detail. Oh, okay, look, we have lovely formatting. Great, okay. So now presumably we can go and grab some of this stuff. Page grids. Do you get a grid system out of the box for this? Let's take a look. Yeah, I think we can use CSS grid. We don't really care about IE11 or anything like that. Do we get an actual do we have to kind of set our own site grid stuff up, or does that provide it out of the box? I'm not reading these docs very well at all. I'm just skimming. Place to paste, create your config file. You'll create tailwind.config.js. Do we have one of those? No. What is npx? Let's run this, because I'm going to try and read these docs properly. What does this do? I have no idea what npx does. Every time I use different JavaScript libraries, I am blown away by the sheer volume of packages and packaging systems that I have no awareness of whatsoever. Well, blah blah blah, that's all doing cool stuff, I'm assuming. Yep, don't really care about any of this stuff, I don't think. Release notes, upgrade guide, controlling file size, blah blah blah. Lots of design. Okay, so that's kind of what we're looking to replace, which is this idea of having CSS classes that are named by the thing. I actually like a mixture. I'm actually interested in having a mixture of Tailwind and named stuff. I don't find this HTML particularly readable, so I'm not a huge fan of that, but I do want to have these as mixed in with my own stuff. So I think the idea is you can kind of grab this out. I mean, obviously that image won't work, and as long as you've kind of set those configs, so that obviously won't work. I'm just using that one as an example just because there's code there. Let's refresh that. It should be laid out exactly. Yeah, so other than that not working, and then we can tweak all of the variables that go into each of those CSS classes. So you can see we kind of got that for free there. So is there any? So why not just use inline styles? Yep, that was kind of. Yeah, so this is where I'm looking to get to. So kind of combining these things with we're making your own variants. So I'm kind of interested in this. I've not used this before. So this is all fine. This kind of makes sense. I'm just skipping over this stuff, so I'm not going into a deep dive on CSS or any of these things. Just want to make it look nice pretty quickly. I'm actually kind of right. So here are themes, breakpoints. Right. So it looks like we don't get a default grid, perhaps. Layout container. That's a total lie. You do. You actually get .container out of the box. Okay, cool. So we might be learning this together at this stage. So let's see what we get. Oh, I actually would assume that is a div. Semantically, it's just a wrapper. We're chucking around stuff. I keep these on the screen. Let's just see what we can start to get to. See if we can get some sort of auto refresh on these going as well. Okay, so does .container have any awareness of how it should be styled? Yes, it knows its width. Great, but it doesn't know to center itself. So you have to give it... Oh, okay, it is literally one SQL, one CSS command per... Right, okay. Helper class. Oh, and it doesn't... MX Auto doesn't give you padding. You go down, right, okay. Oh, okay, I see. To add horizontal... Oh, okay. Yeah, that's... You're going to need to start making more... Okay. Gives you your padding when you get down to the bottom. Fine. So then responsive variants, you can say you prefix them with the namespace of the breakpoints you've set. Okay, cool. So how do you turn this off then? Do you do LGPX0? Try that. Is that a thing? Interesting. The CSS that this generates, I think it uses purge to go and take out the stuff you're not using. But I'm pretty interested. So we then take this down to the bottom, so that's full width. Any of this stuff. Wow, yeah, look. Okay. This is fascinating. There's no padding on that at this stage. So you can see in the computed, the padding will be set. There's nothing. And then as we go down, we'll see that get set there. Oh, I see. M4 isn't a pixel value. That's like a relative value. Okay. 16. Okay, so then we just set the root value somewhere. And you can turn these on and off. Okay, that's pretty cool. So then how do you do columns within that container? Centering by default. Oh, okay, so then you can customize center containers, but set the center option to the theme.container. Ah, okay. Okay, cool. But it still just generates the same CSS, I'm guessing. You just don't have to remember to add the additional class. Okay. Different padding for each breakpoint, you can do that. Cool. Disabling responsive variants, cool. When using a container class, you can disable it entirely. Right, okay, so presumably you can just go and pick and choose the bits of this stuff that you want. Cool. So is there anything just about having, so box sizing is all pretty, so display, floats, clear, they're just like columns? So presumably, that's my problem, is I don't really know what you want to do. We might do like a homework edition of this where we just design some UI stuff so we know what to build. But this just gives us a bunch of stuff out of a box that we don't need to worry about too much. Cool. Well, that was pretty easy to straightforward. So pretty straightforward to set up. It kind of brings us neatly to the end of a stream. So now we have a UI. Well, how do we style some of these cool headings? So let's give it. Let's at least make it look nice for the end of the stream. Spacing, sizing, here we go, cool stuff. So, sans, size. Oh, so there's no semantic styling at all, and H1 doesn't get anything special. You actually have to explicitly set it. So that really is. So this one would then need to be this, and then presumably there's a bold, and you have to learn. Okay, so that's potentially mildly annoying. You basically have to learn. But I guess you would do that if you built your own CSS anyway. I mean, having written CSS frameworks in the past. Okay, cool. So you then get a cool little title. And oh, can we get the fonts that I use for the Sunday Club stuff? That would be super cool. So just look up what they're called because I've immediately forgotten. So we have a font called Sophia Pro. what's the other one? Oh, did I just end up using one? I thought I'd use two. Via Pro, I think. Is the one on here the same as the one on Google Fonts? No. Amazing. That's incredibly annoying. Oh, but I want this one. So I am just going to bump this tab to the other window so I can sign into my Adobe account and grab some code to get this working. And that'd be cool if we could just make it look a bit like Sunday Club at the end, and then we'll have channels. I mean, that will be like Sophia. So what we want to do is activate that, I think. And do you still have to create like font packs? So I used to use this as when it was Typekit. I don't think you have to do that anymore. I actually have no idea how to use the Adobe Fonts thing anymore. You used to basically have to specify a set of fonts to work on each domain, and then you would get a separate JavaScript snippet for each domain, and then you would put that on your site, and it would load it. I'm assuming it's the same. I'm just not quite sure in this UI how to do my Adobe Fonts. I'm not putting it on the screen just in case there's anything that pops up that's web projects. Ah, here we go, great. Okay, so can I create a new... Can I create a new web project? How does one do that? Do I still need to do this? Pro. Okay. Adobe Fonts create web project. Adobe Fonts user guide. The menu. Oh, add fonts to a web project. Okay, sorry, I must have missed that. Sorry, I'm aware of how annoying it is that it's on the other screen, but just in case there's anything in here, I haven't looked at this for a while, so if there's any other projects or stuff that... So, add to web project, cool, okay. You've started a web project, okay. Create new web project. It's called Sunday Club. Want Sophia Pro. I don't want the condensed one. I don't want the soft. Style sheet to import. Then I can just go to layouts. And I just want to chuck... there's some stuff you can do about optimizing font loading, but I'll have to come back to that. I'm just going to chuck that in there for now. You can do preloads and whatnots and fancy stuff. Just chuck that in there to get it working. And then we want to tell... Tailwind that that's our font. So we want to do this in here. Is this now a Java? Oh, I get really confused in this new world. I mean, it looks like it because those three are the same thing. So Font family. Oh, but that's for when they're there. Can I just say that I want it to know about them? Let's try Tailwind Adobe fonts. Using a custom. Let's see what other people are saying about this. Oh, here we go. Okay, so someone says that. Okay, so you have to actually. Oh, okay. Let's see where this is happening. So. Tailwind.config.js, is that being used? I'm not sure, because presumably that would not need to be there. Need to be in here? Unless... yeah, that is why I didn't want to call the model channel earlier. Okay, so we want to... just trying to add a custom font to this really. I don't really want to go too far down the rabbit hole. Just take a look and see if that is being used. So we... let's see, added that as a theme. So we did have extend in there. And then quite what these are. Need to, and then let's say this. These are both. That get picked up in the CSS that's output for this. No, is any... okay, so that's not... when you go through this, go into the actual generating styles. That's fascinating. I'm not 100% sure how to view the root file for that right now. Okay, I don't think we're going to be able to do that with the time that we've got, but that's something I'm going to look at next week. So we've today looked at creating our models. So we've got our channel and our organization, and then getting them through a controller and into the view, adding an association to them so that we can then take a look at a specific channel, take a look at the organization it belongs to, and we've also added in a UI framework called Tailwind, and we took a look at getting a custom font up and running, but we didn't get that working, sadly. But hopefully next week we can... so next week is not going to be on Sunday, which is annoying because of the name of the show. But the I think maybe Friday morning, just because I'm away next weekend. So it might be first thing Friday. And what we'll try and do is just circle back, get everything tidied up. And I might try and during the week just get the changes that we've made up and into master, just so that people can look at them on GitHub. And then perhaps look at the design and getting those things into the front end nicely, so we then have channel events and things like that moving through, just so we can then have this framework and start to look at some learner questions more specifically about how we might add in user authentication, you know, and other things like that. So I'll go scouring at some point in the next couple of weeks for more learner questions around approaches to kind of system-wide stuff rather than this kind of like early initial setup things. So thank you to everyone who has taken a look at these videos already and give me any feedback. I really appreciate it. And if you have any feedback, feel free to reach out in the comments or anywhere that you see that you can comment. Thanks a lot and have a wonderful day.